So what do you think of journaling, Tom?
Of journaling. Okay.
It's the new age thing to do. I was reading a quote this morning by David Cohen Smith, and he was suggesting that journaling was I have the quote here. It was creating the ugly and wretched dwarf of self-concern. That, in other words, the mind, it wants to journal about itself. It's the tendency towards self-obsession and narcissism in the new age culture. And in ceremonial magic, they're often telling you to go do journaling. And his point was, this is like the opposite of making art in a way, right? Making true art would be trying to divinize the reality, try to make a connection to what is most sublime, instead of wallowing in your own narcissistic experience.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how there's, writers like Henry Miller wrote about their own life, but in a way there was a bit of the wretched dwarf of self-concern, and in a way they transcended that. It was something in between. When you read Henry Miller's books, he has these incredible passages, and other times it's just the ugly dwarf of self-concern.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Of course. Of course. I think the in-between is interesting, what you said, because there's like this narcissistic journaling, my emotions and what I feel here and my trauma there, and and what I felt here and what I think about this. And then on the other side, I would say in context of spirituality, there's like the occult kind of way of going about it. And this is like, okay, you're documenting scientific experiment.
Yes, that's exactly what he said, David Smith. That it's legitimate when you're documenting the results of your experiment.
Right, because like if you look at Henry Miller, when he gets into this fugue state of writing, and it's like, and then he's like exploring the unconscious and the occult of his own psyche, and it's like it's not documenting, it's exploring.
Yes.
And then it gets interesting. And the same thing, it's like when you're doing meditation and you have a strange phenomenon, and it's the result of some new techniques that you employ, then I can get behind it. Okay, so that happened. I'm entering this undiscovered country, and I have to document because I'm leaving the concrete operational state of mind behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. I was thinking about how, when I journaled like between the age, I started journaling when I was 13 until I was 22. I just wrote in a journal every single day because I needed to do that. I was like it wasn't like I needed to concretize my the chaos of my adolescence by journaling, or I thought I needed to anyway. And it was sort of self-therapy, right? But it was an adolescent kind of activity, because at that period of your life, you're supposed to be self-obsessed, and you're supposed to be tribal, and you're supposed to be, figuring shit out on that level, right? Whereas when you get to a more mature level, when I started writing music, writing songs, it was about me, but it wasn't really about me. It was like, it wasn't. I was entering a bit of mythos in the thing. I didn't want to write just a song about how I felt about some girl, right? I wanted to write a song like William Blake, or I wanted it to be mythological and biblical and epic, and I think so. Most singer-songwriters, I think, suck really badly. Like, singer-songwriting is a deplorable form of art for many singer-songwriters, because it's all about this, as David Smith was saying, it's all about this ugly, wretched dwarf of self-concern, and whereas the really good songwriters like Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits enter into the mythological and the epic.
I mean, we were just talking about your relationship with Manzarek, right? And so and so the interesting thing is that Jim, Jim
Morrison.
Yeah, you never knew. It's like, still to this point, it's like he was that young, and he kind of transferred his internal processing into this poetry that he made, but you never knew about him. And so it's like the moments where journalists were trying to expose who he was as a young boy moving around because his father was in the military and he was kind of rebelling. So he was like upset about the thing because he didn't want him to be that transparent. He wanted to transport his,
He understood the mythical
into mythical poetry and into a collective kind of trance or whatnot. So that, and like Rimbaud or
exactly. And I guess he had these powerful, acid experiences or something. Like apparently he just was sitting doing acid, on Venice Beach or something. And so he probably had that experience, right? And then he put that into music.
So you had a relationship with Manzarek.
Oh, you want me to tell you the story of when I met Raymond Manzarek? Okay, I was a young aspiring singer-songwriter, and I was playing in Montreal at these cabaret shows. I was opening up for different bands all the time, and working with this music producer who we hired Ray Manzarek and I forget the other guy, a beat poet. They had this thing going. Michael McClure was his name, and they had a concert. They had a concert, and I was, and they were kind of they were playing at the prime, look at around 11 o'clock, and then Ray Manzarek went in the back room and was flirting with all the young girls and talking like a arrogant, pompous fool, and I was like sitting there like hating his guts. Or perhaps it was youthful jealousy, you could say, because he was successful. And I remember him saying, oh, he just earned all this money on the song, Light My Fire. He actually said that. I was like, I never had to work again in a real job because I earned this, because I wrote, he helped. I don't know if he wrote the words to that song. Maybe it was his song.
It was Robbie Krieger's song.
Oh, it was Robbie Krieger's song. Right. Okay. In any case, he went on and did his thing with Michael McClure, this kind of artsy beat poetry, and then I came on afterwards.
In the 90s or what year is that?
This is late 90s, yeah.
Late 90s.
Late 90s.
Right.
Late 90s, Montreal, late 90s. Club Soda, I think the place was called, and so there was there was kind of after bands that came after him, and I was on after him, and I was playing with this band that was kind of Chicago style blues, and so I was doing my songs with them. I was like jamming away my song. It was like in tuning in open D, and I was riffing away and singing, and there was this harmonic.
You're leaving out the most crucial part of the story.
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
And as I was playing, I was thinking about Ray Manzarek and how he's washed up and how I'm way better than him, and I was I thought I was the greatest, and I was full of, and just before I got on stage, he had said, "Get out of my fucking way," just like a stupid star who has no respect for his audience. So I was playing my song. I was coming to the end of my song, and I got this idea. It popped into my head, right? And I started singing. You know that it would be untrue. Crowd went bananas because he was there, but he didn't even make any references to the Doors, but right. And nobody had heard, they wanted to hear a Doors song, of course. And so I played this rocking improvised version of Light My Fire, where I was screaming, and I totally blew him away out of the water. I completely destroyed him with my blues band, and then this was in the newspaper the next day, and it was the most famous I've ever been. It was my Andy Warhol moment of fame.
So why was it?
That's my story of Ray Manzarek. Well, they just did a review of the show, and they said Ray Manzarek, he was okay, he was kind of boring, but there was a great after show with Andrew Sweetie and his band,
Nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
still
was in,
boggles my mind though that Jim died with 27 and was, that mature in his writing. It's still so interesting to me.
well, he was channeling Rimbaud, who was like 18 when he
Yeah,
invented modern symbolic poetry, right?
right.
And then he quit poetry at like 22 or something, right? He just quit. He's just like, I'm out of here. I don't want to write any poetry anymore. I want to go and walk across Africa
Where he died
and sell
relatively.
guns and slaves.
Yeah. Didn't he die of a rotten foot or something?
Yeah, he died from walking. He walked too much, and he had a
He
bad knee,
walked.
and he was in the ambient. Yeah, he tried to walk. He walked like half across half of northern Africa or something, and then
That's too much for a Frenchman, I think.
yeah, yeah, he and then they cut off his leg. He was amputated, and he died shortly after. But he
Wow.
was Jim Morrison's favorite poet,
Yeah,
and Jim Morrison was channeling him, right?
right.
Who knows what he was channeling, right?
I
Maybe
don't, that's a good question.
Baudelaire or
Weren't Baudelaire and Rimbaud like just a couple of years ago?
lovers. They were lovers.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Or
Interesting.
it's Verlaine too. There's a story where I think is it that Verlaine tried to shoot Rimbaud or something like that, or they got into a shootout. Those things don't happen anymore. It's no fun. There's no duels or shootouts or we live in such a boring time, you know.
I don't know. I don't know if that's so cool to have like these old kind of old-timey guns pointed at you in 2 meters distance. It's like,
Those days are over.
yeah,
I definitely have a certain nostalgia for them, but
yeah. Okay, so yeah, no, but I always liked this kind of way of dealing with poetry and dealing with the collective unconscious, and it's still so powerful if you listen to the music, if you still read Baudelaire or Rimbaud. It's just
mhm.
like it's kind of eternal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like the symbol. I like symbolism. That's the whole thing. It's like because it's compressed information and it's
Yeah,
mysterious and vivid at the same time and bold and right. In
yeah,
a way, I hate philosophy, and this is nothing against our philosopher friends. It's really I have nothing against them, and it's just not my kind of mind. I like to leap between ideas. I don't like to make arguments, and flesh out long metaphysical arguments. I much prefer poetry and music and art than philosophy. Even though I know it's necessary to read philosophy in order to, it's necessary to have that, like what John Vervaeke calls dual processing between, between philosophy and art. Because if you just have art without philosophy, then your art tends to be kind of. Somebody was saying that in the IDW form, your art becomes kind of finger painting. It becomes kind of irrelevant. Whereas
right.
you have philosophy without art, it's dry and analytical and extremely tedious and totally masculine without any spirit.
It's a question of how you conduct philosophy. You
Yes,
know,
of course,
it's
and that's
just just shifting of mental concepts for the sake of it. That's of no use. But
yeah,
to have something that gives you a more broad understanding of what this is all about in a clear language,
yes,
that like encompasses art and sciences and poetry and everything, and even maybe theology. Then then it gets interesting. But
yes,
just compare mental concepts of whomever just for the
yeah,
sake of it without any relevance for my day-to-day being in the world, then I don't know, I think it's not engaging for me, at least. And
yes,
I need a book on philosophy to add something to my understanding to the world and broaden my possibilities of acting.
yes, or even subtract something like even something that is something take something, give me a gap. Like I thought I understood something, and then I experience a gap. Which I think that's what poetry is about, right? It's about breaking the conceptual mind. It's about this, and having a direct experience of the divine, right? Whereas philosophy tries to describe it, or it's a secondary activity.
Yeah.
But when it's the best, it's probably both, right? I would say. I mean, I'm not dissing philosophy. It's just my own.
I think we were like talking last time or the day before about the difference between Schopenhauer and Hegel, and I was like, and reading up on them, and because we don't have like YouTube clips of them, you only have the writings, and so I try to imagine like what kind of people they were.
What kind of YouTube clips they would have?
Yes, if you really think about it, so why? I mean, the writings of Hegel really suck, and they're not good because, like, I think there are many reasons for that, and the most common explanation is that the book was, Phenomenology of Mind, of Spirit, was very hastily written at the time when Napoleon entered, Dresden or Germany.
Oh.
And so it was like very hastily written. And so that's like the historical analysis. But you have to ask yourself, why was he so famous in the first place? And I think, it's just a thought, I think he was a great orator in the terms of Peterson. So it's like, the story goes that he
was very famous, unlike Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, who died in obscurity, right?
Mm-hmm. So Schopenhauer was very angry because all the students were going to Hegel. Why? Because I think Hegel was great at telling these big, all-encompassing stories about Dasein and thing in itself and whatnot and spirit. And as Peterson, and so he weaves all these big topics in such an engaging way, but he had no way of condensing it and so that was the critique of Schopenhauer, that Hegel has no scientific understanding at all. Because at that time, Schopenhauer still identified himself as a scientist, because science and philosophy were still kind of fused together. And Schopenhauer was like kind of critiquing Hegel that he made like beginner's mistakes in terms of real science, right? Mm-hmm. And so Hegel like a good and great orator and great storyteller, but he was not equipped to put this into precise writing out of historical reasons and political reasons, and also I think because he was not able to in a kind of way. Because if you compare Hegel's famous book and World as Will and Representation, the latter one is so precise, and it's like there's no wiggle room. There's a clear language as philosophy.
Yeah, well, personally, I could find Schopenhauer very readable, right? You can just read him. You can read him. He's very readable.
Right.
Whereas Hegel, you have to beat your head against a stone over and over and over again to get what the meaning is and what he's trying to say, which is intentional, I think, in the sense like he doesn't want to leave any stone unturned. He wants to be completely exhaustive in his phenomenology and exploration. And some people really dig going into that. Going into that hyperconceptuality, some people, but which is probably, I don't know, because he did make some incredible philosophical discoveries as well, right? Would you not say? I don't know, because I'm not an expert in Hegel, but he did, discover the dialectic and understood that and had a good critique of Kant.
Yeah, but I also think it's
like categorizational thinking,
historical reasons, political reasons, reasons of temperament, and the inability to write precise. And all these things come together that his writing is so pompous in a kind of way and so unclear. It's like because you can wrestle with complex issues and still use a clear language, and that is like what Wittgenstein said. It's like everything that you want to express, you should express clearly, and if you can't express it clearly, you shouldn't express it. And so it's like
yes and no. Like you could, that could become another mania, trying to express everything clearly rather than taking intuitive leaps of and exploring having it a more process
But again, if like we
experience.
are talking, you and me,
Yeah.
you do your best and I do my best to transmit precisely what you and I want to talk about, right? It's like you're not intentionally being obscure and opaque. You know,
Yeah.
let me give you an example of being opaque. It's like, okay, so I don't even know if I can do it like intentionally, but it's like, shit, I can't do it right now, but you know what I mean. It's just like to speak intentionally opaque that doesn't add anything to the
Yes,
conversation.
I would like to negate your negation here.
No, that's not even opaque. That's
You know,
the dark side of the sun is like your opaqueness and argument, something like this.
using weird metaphors and things like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, then why why are all these people so enamored with Hegel? Why are they so in love with Hegel? What does Hegel do for them?
Because
Like Zizek, for example, Zizek is responsible for making Hegel cool again, basically.
right.
The most uncool philosopher ever, right, would be Hegel. Perhaps, I don't know. Maybe there's some. Kant's pretty uncool as well, and there's a lot of uncool philosophers. But why is Hegel suddenly cool again? Why is he interesting? Why is he edgy to these people, and why do they love him so much?
Why is Peterson so famous? I think it's the same question, because I think he's engaged because the
Well, I find him a clear thinker and speaker, Peterson. I find him. I mean, there's some problems maybe with some of his ideas, but
what I mean is, I think the lectures that Hegel did are very similar. Were very similar than Peterson in the university. It's like big storytelling, engaging storytelling. You know?
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't know that about Hegel, but that's the polar opposite of his books.
No, it's exactly like his books.
Big storytelling?
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Well, there's a dramatic statements. Yeah, I guess. But I mean, the books are dense and difficult.
Yeah,
whereas public speaking at its best is compression, and what Jordan Peterson does well is he has great rhetoric. He is able to do what you say, express simple ideas in his speeches.
What I mean, Andrew, is what Peterson doesn't translate his lectures into the book. The books are very precise. He doesn't speak in the book like he speaks in the lectures. If you compare these
they're different. Well, if you compare Maps of Meaning or something.
No, if you compare the lectures and 12 Rules for Life, these are two different modes of speaking, of presenting ideas. If you would put his ideas as he's transmitting them in the lectures, if you would transmit them verbatim into the books, they were kind of similar, opaque, like Hegel's ideas, like, and then spirit here, and then it's like he's all over the place in his lectures in a very engaging way, and I love that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the comparison between Hegel and Peterson. I wouldn't make that. I could think we could find a better.
I mean, analogy, in terms of rhetoric, in a way of, not in terms of philosophy, but in the ways of, I think Hegel was a great orator.
Hegel was charismatic, okay, and popular, right?
Yeah,
right. Whereas Peterson, that's okay. I get it. Yeah.
Why was he popular? Because I think he was immensely engaging in the live lectures, let's say.
Yeah, yeah, and so Schopenhauer was kind of like Zizek or something, being angry at being like, oh, Peterson's this terrible, or no, that's a bad analogy. What would they be like on YouTube? I want to go back to this question. I'm trying to imagine Hegel on YouTube. What would he be like? He'd talk very carefully and slowly and in a monotone voice, or would he be very excited and dramatic and hubristic? and Schopenhauer would be sort of like caustic and angry, and I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, we should. It would be nice to make YouTube videos and pretend that we're what these philosophers. Well,
I don't know. I don't know. I just find it super interesting, like how temperament and time and approach to the world just like bring forth so different approaches to to philosophy. Hmm?
I was about to interrupt you, but so I'm struggling with Zizek in the moment because he's very popular among all kinds of people, right?
Yeah.
Zizek. And I've read like three big of his books. I'm halfway through his big opus book, and I like him and I hate him. I have this. I think he's great and insightful and brilliant, fantastic, and I can't stand him. I think he's just totally full of shit. At the same time, I have
What do you
this
like?
incredible ambivalence and antagonism towards Zizek. I want to punch him and hug him at the same time. It's like, what do you think of Zizek?
Oh, give me a sec. Before I go into that, like, what don't you like explicitly?
It's
On
just a word again. What you say, endless word salads, unedited blathering of repetitions of Lacan. It's
yeah,
basically Lacan's little brother, and then spurious blathering language. And then at the same time, he's a very good writer sometimes, and gets to some. So it's like going through this jungle with a machete, and then you get to like, oh, there's an interesting insight, and then
right.
and also it's there's the thing is that my interests are totally different than his, and he has absolutely no sense of mystic practice, meditation, anything like
Yeah,
that. There's nothing of that in it. It's all words. So it's just words. And it's the same thing that I object to in Hegel. Hegel thought that words, concepts can lead you to the absolute in some sense,
yeah,
and that you could get to enlightenment through words and word salad and more words and words and words and words and words until you develop this thing called absolute knowing,
yeah.
which is what you get there through words, you get there through sentences, you get there either through thinking. So that's my problem with Hegel, Zizek. I'm less familiar. Like I couldn't really tell you about Lacan so much, although I think they're all very interesting at the same time. But it's also it also develops these cults of conceptuality that are just conceptual kind of these cults of conceptuality, I would call it. So there's a
What,
cult around Zizek, and there's a kind of a Lacanian cult in France, right? And they just talk about things, and they talk about desire, and they talk about the absolute, and they talk about these things. All they do is talk.
what I like, one thing that sticks out for me, it's when it's not, embodied in a kind of, if it's not. So, like, look at Sloterdijk, and Sloterdijk, he's Germany's most famous philosopher right now, but
Yeah.
he is equally informed by psychology and let's say spirituality, because like he spent a good part of his youth like in an Osho community, I think, and so
Uh-huh.
it's like his philosophy is tempered by psychology and psychological insights and science and spirituality, and so he doesn't fall off the cliff,
Of
and
endless blathering, conceptual blathering, right?
yeah, and you feel like there's actually some substance to what he's saying because he's well tempered, and that's why I love him so much, because he's clearly an academic philosopher, but he's not just playing with some concepts because he has personal issues or he's not embodied
Yeah.
enough. It's
Yeah.
like, so he is he can back up his philosophy with some psychological and theological or spiritual claims, And so then it gets interesting. When it's just concept of concepts.
Well, Zizek kind of makes, theological claims. Like he says he's a Christian atheist, and he said he claims to be some kind of communist, but it's never quite clear what he's really at, because there's always something slippery, and
it's too much ideology for me. That's what it's like with
yeah, and that's his thing is ideology in a way, isn't it?
I think ideology is the ugly little sister of missing spiritual embodiment. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's, I guess that's, you've just put it very succinctly, and that's my feeling, And again, I was thinking this today also. It's like people think they have some objective truth about reality, but we're just like navigating our feelings about things, our intuitions. And another thing why we could hate Hegel, because Hegel hated intuition. He thought it was just a lie, and he was always criticizing intuition.
Right.
Whereas all we're doing really is groping blindly with our, try to understand things as best we can with intuition. And it's all often very personal, and we think it's not personal, that there's some objective truth out there that we could find by working hard on concepts. But often, again, it's what Nietzsche said, that philosophers are just writing their own biography.
Right. I always think about heuristics, in this sense, when I think about intuition, because like, have you seen this video? I mean, it's just one of these million videos where I think it's a stadium, and so one guy throws a frisbee over the whole of the football field, and like a dog, like one of these like super fast dogs, like simultaneously runs to the other end to the field, and somehow magically dog and frisbee kind of converge, and so he gets the perfect catch. And so you have to think about the internal processing. What is going on that a dog can do this in such a precise way, and has like the perfect heuristics of speed, direction, intention, jumping, catching, and everything. And so that's heuristics. It's like you can't program a computer to do that. It's a heuristic process. And I think that's what we're doing in life. We have all these different heuristics at work. It's like in our intuition, like, that will happen here, and that will happen there. And like we're always trying to catch the frisbee. It's like, that's what it is. That's what we're doing. We're not like linear processes. We're always like kind of expecting everything, like how to behave in this kind of circumstances. But I think that is what cognition is about, and to
yeah, that's what I was trying to say. We take these sort of leaps. We're taking leaps all the time, but there's something about the mind that takes the illusion that there's actually some kind of linear process going on. There's some kind of calculation, right? But most of it is sort of unconscious and biased, and then we have these magical moments of connection, and then we move out of the heuristic and we fumble around, and then all these things come together.
Right.
So yeah, and I think people, the trouble with, like, one of the modern problems is people mistaking like intellectual understanding for ontological depth.
Right.
So people sort of think, and it's like machine man, like what Gurdjieff called machine man. People sort of think in a machine-like way about operations, in a computer-like way, where human beings aren't like that at all. We don't think about how to walk to the store. We just walk to the store, and that's a heuristic. And how do we do that? It's so infinitely complex that it could never possibly be explained. Practically everything is like that, right?
Right.
Practically everything is a mysterious heuristic and impossible to understand in any conceptual way whatsoever.
Yeah, sort of. Mm-hmm.
No? Okay, what's the sort of?
No, but it's like that what you're doing is a conceptual understanding of heuristics.
Yeah, but that's the most limited aspect of what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. It's the most surface aspect of all the things that are going on in a conversation.
I think
we're just focused on that because that's what we're doing. I mean, I know I'm not saying the conceptual mind is a completely necessary part of the entire process, but it's not the whole thing. And we mistake the conceptual mind for the totality of experience.
Yeah. I think it's like philosophy should inform me about what this world is about, what I can do, who I am. But it's like I think we talked about it. If I conceptualize, let's take an example, the world as a cave. I'm in the world, I'm acting in the world, this old kind of paradigm, and then my actions are somewhat determined by this kind of worldview. But if I think like in a more, radical constructivistic way, that I'm acting with the world, not the world as a cave, but, there's an interplay between consciousness and world, and the world is not my mother, but more my wife, then I have a different conception of what volition and will means, and then I can act differently in the world. But in any case, the overarching idea, the overarching model about what world is informs my volition. And that is the purpose of it. It's like if it doesn't translate into acting, if it doesn't translate into volition and will, then it literally has no use, philosophy.
Yeah, it's just conceptual noise.
Yeah, and it's arbitrary, and it's like a friend of mine always says, easy come, easy goes. Because it has no root, no anchor in the real world. It should inform your acting, and if it doesn't, it's basically useless.
Yeah, I mean, the philosophers that I like are passionate. Even if I disagree with them, or if I keep saying I hate Hegel, but it's almost provocative. It's not that I really hate Hegel so much as that there's a reaction to that which is kind of like a necessary. I'm still within Hegelian paradigm where I need to negate Hegel. So I'm still, in a way, Hegel is informing me somehow, even if I'm reacting against him. But it's a profoundly emotional, right? It's not I think this proposition about Hegel. It's an emotional reaction. It's it's a feeling and an intuition and an embodied response to people who love and read Hegel, which I'm by negating Hegel, I hopefully that is a positive negation, a negation of the negation. but anyway, yeah, just reacting against the hyper conceptuality and hyper and logic of and to say that doesn't provide us as a full map of the world.
So let me expound on that, because what's interesting, I think we talked about this. There's this little book from Schopenhauer where he talked about the rhetorical tricks that we employ. Right, the linguistic speech patterns, and this is like such an influential book because it informs so much about psychology today, linguistics, NLP, whatever. And so the idea is, and so what he very early understood is that these mental concepts, because they are based on language, they can always be deconstructed with language, and there's no language-based concept that cannot be deconstructed. Every philosophical theory is by their design able to be deconstructed. And so he discovered, 40 different ways to do that. Some more banal, and some techniques more intricate. And so he looked at the deep structure of how we argue, how we use language. And so when I read that, it has for me a profound impact, not like twofold. Like one is that I know that every model that I create or use has its limits and boundaries and is able to be deconstructed. But the other point is that I can monitor my own behavior, that I'm not using this rhetorical tricks with the goal of undermining other people, because that's what we always do. You know, it's like when we're having discussions, in one form or another, we're always using these kinds of rhetorical tricks. And this is kind of, if you know them, it's like you have to get aware of what you're doing. And so you have a philosophy of that's the reason why Schopenhauer was such a pessimist, because it's like, no, you have to renounce, you know, your desires and all these things.
He was, that's why he was talking about compassion, because what do you have left? Like, I just had a thought about compassion, right? Whereas you're in a maze, an impossible maze, right, of conceptuality, and no, there are no solutions to getting out of the maze except compassion, because any positive or negative solution that you would come up with also has its opposite and eats itself. So you're kind of trapped in this maze.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've expressed that clearly. I think that, as far as I understand, Schopenhauer is like, okay, compassion, that's what it's about, right? And that is, I guess, compassion and wisdom as a unity, right? Not stupid compassion, not idiot compassion, as Trump called it. Or sentimental compassion, but real compassion is the only way to let's say, okay, here we are in the maze, and the only thing between us really is that. Otherwise, we're just caught in our own a war of all against all, concept against concept, person against person, Hegel versus versus whoever.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense to you, Tom? I don't know if I expressed it properly, but it seemed like an intuition. What's right about Schopenhauer?
Like heuristics. No, it's like
I only do heuristics and leaps. But I think that's what's right about Schopenhauer.
I don't know. I don't really know his stance on compassion. I know that he very much tilted towards Eastern traditions, because it's like the idea that I don't want to say illusion, but the world is our representation, and so it's like you can get lost in that maze and you have to renounce it in some sense, whereas Hegel is more Christian in his way of, unfolding of spirit. And so it's like like between those, it's more like a theological problem in some sense.
Theological difference. So one is sort of like Buddhist emptiness, or Indian Maya, the illusory nature of all things, and the other is spirit is a bone, embodied rationality, and so that's why they're so opposed to each other. But at the same time, they probably both have a necessity. Like the incarnational model and the deconstruction of all things model coming together.
I was thinking about this because, like, when we think about the integral stage, the integral stage owes a lot to Hegel and this kind of thinking, unfolding,
no doubt,
right? Yeah. And so you have like always, and you have like this saying, integral is to say it's not either or. It's yes and, it's not only this, but it's also,
which becomes another annoying cliche.
Yeah. But to be like truly integral, you have to also integrate, you have to integrate Schopenhauer, and Schopenhauer is negation in a kind of way. So it's also neither nor, and so to have both yes and neither nor. It's like when you say, oh, it's this and that, but it's also the opposite. And when you can hold both polarities with both hands, then you have a truly integral view of things, because explanations are never simple. It's never only this and that.
Yeah.
It's also neither this nor that. And so, you know what I'm saying? And so I think like both have a lot to offer.
Well, John Vervaeke calls that opponent processing. there is an oppositional aspect, but at the same time, there's a unity.
Right.
Right. At the same time, there's a wholeness, a unity. You know, there's a one. What Platonia is called the one. But at the same time, there's an oppositional and a dialectical dynamic
Yin and yang, man.
going on.
Yin and yang.
But it's not yin and yang as a closed circle totality, right? Because the closed circle is a trap. You know, it's not this dynamism within a closed circle. It's that the circle itself is the totality, which means any representation of it is a limitation. So it's like the circle without center or periphery. It's a famous mystical kind of statement. Right?
Oh yes.
Which is the problem with the yin yang is it could become a totalizing point of view. It could become totalitarian, right? It could become this totalitarian system, right? But like there's another representation called the Wheel of Joy in Tibet where there's three, you know, moving together, and then there's openings in the circle, which are kind of, which is a more dynamic representation.
Yeah, I like that, the infinite point. No, what did you say? What was the metaphor you used?
The circle that has no the circle has no center or periphery.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a circle has a center and a periphery, right? That's what a circle is. But what if the point is everywhere, and you know, then there's infinite circles, which can't be represented by a circle anymore, because a circle is a boundary, and there's no boundary between between the inside and the outside, and the non-dualistic view.
I think we talked about this last time. Not every number is infinite.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Every number is Or Ein Sof, infinite luminous expression that has no beginning, middle, or end, but just appears from no thing.
I think again, it's like all these kinds of things should help to leave, have a. I don't know. It's like I don't even know what the idea is, but to lead a better life, or to be a more interesting life. I mean, in this sense, I agree with Zizek that happiness should not be the goal, you know, especially like superficial happiness, and that what is like perverted in our society. You know, you have to travel, you have to do this and do that, and then you're happy and everything is fine. I think that's not the point of our existence.
Yeah, well, it's an ever receding goal, because if you attain this moment of happiness, it has its own inertia built into it, and it's already rotten death, right? You know, you're on the beach with your margarita and the sexy people all around you, and everything is just, you know, you're in this ultimate paradise suddenly, and then you know, then you get bitten by a tarantula, or you have massive sunstroke, or you know, your hotel is like filled with rats, and then a tsunami wave just starts to crash anyway. So you get the picture.
Like to be completely honest, I'm never happy as in itself happy. It's like I'm happy when I'm doing certain things. You know, I'm happy now having this conversation. I'm happy now when I'm doing a meditation, or I'm happy when I'm when I'm writing, or when I'm like doing my work or whatever. Then I'm happy. But it's like the moments in between. You know, it's just like to say I'm happy. No, then the abyss is opening up. It's like, oh shit. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think like happiness is something that just descends upon you. It's just like, you can have like this feeling only arises me while I'm doing it, and while I'm like kind of approaching a flow state or whatever. It's like then I, but
well, happiness is total absorption, right? Usually, I mean, it was when you feel the most joy, when you're totally absorbed in the nowness of everything. That's when you feel the most joy. But in Buddhism, we talk about joy without the seeds of falling back. which is
What
this
is-
kind of, which means that most joys we have are conditional, so they have a negative side. So you have great sex, and then you have postcoital depression, or something is really great and fantastic, and then you're like, and then you're in the total banal, right?